Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Fort Dodge Region Legislative Forum. My name is Jill Nelson. I'm the Community Development Director here at the Growth Alliance, and my colleague Kelly Halstead is joining me today, along with our state legislator, Senator Tim Kreinbrink, and Representative Ann Meyer. And thank you to those of you that submitted questions. We're going to be moving through all of those, but first I want to give Representative Meyer and Senator Kreinbrink a chance to just kind of give a short update and provide a little bit of information as they are getting ready to head back to the Capitol next week to wrap up their legislative sessions. So Senator Kreinbrink, let's go ahead and start out with you.
Well, thanks, Jill, and hello to everybody. This is going to be the new way that we're going to do our eggs and issues. This is going to be awesome from now on. But no, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all of you for joining us. There's going to be a lot. I know we had a chance to look through the questions a little bit, and there's going to be a lot of questions after we're done answering the questions, I'm sure, just because there's a lot of unknown out there. I was talking to a group last night, and we just don't know what we don't know, and so it's going to be interesting to find out, and we'll talk a little bit more as we go through this. And you kind of know I'm the one that's in the budget area with the appropriations and those type of things, so I'll give you a little bit of background when we get into the questions, what's happening there. But as Jill said, we're going to be starting next Wednesday at 9 in the morning. Hopefully we're going to go hard the entire week. And then we will start back again on Monday the following week, and hopefully wrap it up by Saturday of the second week in June. If not, I'm sure we'll be going longer, but I think we'll probably try as hard as we can to get this thing wrapped up as quick as we possibly can. Ann?
Same thing. We've been addressing over the last 10 weeks individual constituent concerns from everything from unemployment, economic development grants that have been happening, any problem that it could have cropped up during this time, we've been addressing with all of our constituents. We do anticipate through the House, we have had the same communication. We anticipate starting Wednesday, going through Friday, and then we'll go back on Monday and hopefully wrap it up in the week, but we just don't have that information yet. There's some policy. So we left right before the second week of funnel, and it's our understanding that we're going to go back and finish a few policy bills that are priority for both the House and the Senate. So we'll start policy this week is my understanding, and then work on the budget next week. So that's it. We're looking forward to getting back and getting the work done that we have been missing.
Great, thank you to you both. So we're just going to jump right into the questions then that were submitted. So first of all, I think that there's a lot of questions as to what our state budget is going to look like. So the specific question that was asked is, what is the expected revenue shortfall for the state budget, and how will that shortfall be addressed?
Yeah, I can probably jump into that, right away. We've been dealing with appropriations as well as education appropriation, which I'm the vice chair with, or the co-chair with David Kerr on that, and then I'm the assistant chair on the Senate Appropriations Committee. The REC meets today. So the REC is a revenue estimating conference, and we've kind of gone over this before, but the revenue estimating conference's job is to take all the indicators that they can get their hands on. It's a small bipartisan group that gets together. David Roeder is the leader of that, and he's in charge of the budget, basically the revenues of the state of Iowa. They will give us, they'll go through all their economic indicators, grain prices, amount of taxes that have been paid, the amount of taxes they think is going to be coming in. I always say it's kind of like a church. You know, you try to get your programs put into place with really not knowing how much the parishioners are going to give that year, but you still have to have a plan to go forward. It's not a fail-safe plan where, you know, we're guaranteed that money, but still you have to plan off of something. So that's going to be coming in later today, which then will give us an idea of approximately how much revenue that we have to work with. The frustrating part is that the REC has been wrong more than they've been right. Kind of like a weather forecaster. You know, you can be wrong and still have your job, I guess. But it's hard to do that because you just don't know, you know, how much revenue, much people are going to spend or how the businesses are going to do, but you just still have to estimate it. So anyway, when that comes back, then that'll give us an idea of how much revenue that we'll have available for us to delegate to the different entities that are out there, which Ann and I talk a lot about this. Every one of the entities that are out there thinks that they're the most important. So, you know, we just have to be fair as legislators, you know, to be fair across the board and make sure that everybody's treated fairly and has the money that they need to give the services to the Iowans, you know, the state of Iowa. But right now, we were planning on doing a status quo budget, and what that means is basically the $7.6 billion budget that we had last year. Before this COVID happened, we were predicting close to $8.1 billion of revenue coming in for the next fiscal year. So it'll be interesting from the 8.1 billion to wherever they come down to now, what we're going to have available. Status quo means that we're going to still try to be around that 7.6 billion. We've already promised K through 12 schools, and it's been signed into law. That's 100 million that we have already signed into law for K through 12 schools. So then that, you know, brings us to the point where, okay, there's 100 million that we've already given from our budget last year. So that then we're thinking, okay, do we have to cut an additional 100 million from what we're looking at for everything else that's out there? And everybody kind of cringes. The ace in the hole here is that the CARES Act has given the governor quite a bit of money, and the governor has held on to a lot of those funds, and so those funds are still available. And I think a lot of the HHS money that is available or that we need to spend, we're going to be able to get that out of the CARES Act. So that's going to alleviate a large amount of revenue, almost as much as what we promised to K through 12 schools. So we're not going to have to be nearly as cut happy as what we thought we were going to have to be. And then if we get a favorable, which everybody's predicting that we're going to have a favorable REC number, which, you know, you can put as much faith in that as you want, but they think that we're going to have a favorable REC number, then then it's going to be the Senate and the House and the governor's job to negotiate, you know, those numbers to the point where we all can feel comfortable. One of the things that we've always said is that we don't want to promise more than we can deliver. And that's actually, when we were sitting before COVID-19, we had $450 million in a savings account. And thank goodness we had that because of the hard times. And I always tell my clients, it's kind of like you having money in a savings account or a now account someplace that if a fridge or a stove or a air conditioner or furnace goes out, you have the money to be able to take care of that emergency. And this is pretty much an emergency. So thank goodness that we have done the planning we did in the past to have that extra funds available to help us through this period of time. And not both sides of the aisle were in favor of having that money sitting in the savings account. If it's there, a lot of people want to spend it. And I'm just thankful that we didn't and we kept it. And now we have it available, so our state isn't going to be hurting so drastically. So I don't know if I left anything else for you to talk about, Ann, but that's just what I kind of think is a quick synopsis of what what our budget was like and what we feel it's going to be like. But, we don't know until after, maybe January.
I think that you've pretty much covered the budget, and that is your area, so I appreciate that. I really don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, thank you. As would not come as a surprise to anybody, the rest of our questions that were submitted really have to do with COVID-19 and future legislation that is going to come down that is related to that, and then just the different areas really of the budget. And so we'll jump into that. It doesn't come as a surprise to anybody when I say that everyone would agree that coronavirus has had a significant impact on our economy. So what type of legislation is being considered to address future pandemics?
I'll start with that one. So we have a few different task force, if you will, in the House that are just working on pandemic related issues. This caught everyone by surprise, and there were really there weren't any processes put in place to address this. One thing that happened after the state kind of closed down, everything closed down, we found that there were some areas that weren't affected so much by the virus, yet they were terribly economically affected because everything around them closed down. As the progress of the virus spread came through and we got more testing done, the governor started to break out into the RMCC regions based on what resources were available around the state. So like we're in Webster County and most of the Northwest area, we're in RMCC 3. We have had, in the middle and at the beginning, we had very, very few cases. So based on the testing that was done and based on what we've heard from constituents, we're thinking if something like this happens again, we're going to address it on a region, county by county basis rather than shut everything down like happened in the beginning. Again, there wasn't a lot of information, a lot of processes put into place. So that's one of the things we're looking at, that legislation. And then a lot of things went into place. The governor decreased regulations on a lot of businesses, and we're looking at some of those regulations that were suspended and wondering if we can maybe keep some of those regulations out in the future. I mean, if we're doing okay without them now, maybe we might be able to do okay without them in the future. So there are some of us looking at the different regulations that were suspended and seeing if we can possibly get that into legislation as well. Those are a couple of things that we're working on.
One of the things that, I think Ann and I are both in education, you are, aren't you?
Yes, yep.
So, one of the things that the CARES money did give the governor was some money for education. So I know the task force has been put into place that through the help of AEAs, they're going to allocate about $7 million for online learning. They don't know, if the virus does come back or if schools are not going to open in August, which I can see the parents say, "Oh, please have it open," right, Jill? Mm-hmm. You're probably liking it at home, but the thing is that we have to be up and ready for online learning, and to the point where they're able to function as classes. And so there's several different entities there. Number one is to have classes that students can get on. One of the things that's coming out of this, which I think is pretty cool, is that if there's let's say Hoover in Des Moines has a advanced chemistry class and they've only got 11 kids taking it and there's room for 14 more. Pocahontas, Iowa, or or another high school could have their students actually take that class online with that instructor from Lincoln and Des Moines and get credit for it. And so it's kind of like, there'll kind of be an open um, menu out there that people can surf through and take classes in other schools with teachers that are licensed to teach those either college courses or high school courses, and to fill those classes up. And then that, like Pocahontas, for instance, would have to buy that seat from Lincoln in Des Moines. So a lot of really pretty neat things are happening, and we just feel that if this does happen again, or if we're to the point where all schools can't open up totally in August, that we have to be ready educationally to be able to handle that without losing the education part of the equation. So with the help of Tom Lane and AEAs, Director Lebo has pretty much put Tom Lane in charge of getting that up and running. And so that's going to be a huge. And then of course in the more rural areas, we talk about connectability. So, some of these children don't have Wi-Fi, or some of them don't have computers. And so this is all things that we're trying to address to actually be able to go virtual, if we need to do that. So, I think, like Ann said, it's going to, caught us all by surprise, and it showed you how unprepared in a lot of areas we probably were. And this gives us a kind of a wish or to-do list now that we can start checking off when we feel that we have a lot of this stuff under control. So if there's any hidden blessing in this, or silver lining in what happened, I think speaking to the question, we're going to be more prepared next time. Maybe not right now, but we're eventually going to be more prepared than what we've ever been before.
Okay, thank you. The next question is around business recovery. So what type of additional tax relief is being considered for COVID-19 business recovery?
Is there anything else that anybody wanted to ask for that? Is it just a general question, or is it specifically to restaurants or to small business, or?
So nothing specific. So the question was just relative to businesses in general. I think that were significantly impacted by coronavirus, and whether it is, the question was specifically about tax relief, but if you want to talk about any programs, incentives, any sort of recovery programs that are being
Well, I know that the PPP, the payment or the paycheck protection plan, that was, I know that our banks were very busy, so I think Fort Dodge did a nice job of spreading the news for that. And I think there's a lot of our small businesses that did participate and did receive grants for that. But that's a federal fund. We're more in the unemployment area. Each business pays unemployment insurance, so I don't know if we can expect our premiums to go up for unemployment or not. I know that's one thing that, maybe we can try to help hold those down. It's an interesting question, and, I think Ann and I can probably take that back, with this. One of the things I know that the Senate is looking for, on the stimulus check that came out to most people, that $1,200 or $2,400 for a couple, and if you have kids, there's $500 more added on for every child. That is supposed to be taxable, and I don't know federally if it's going to be taxable, but I know that we've been hearing from Ways and Means that they're trying to get it to waive the taxes on that on the state tax level. So that's one of the things, more on a personal note, not totally business. And, if we had control of the PPP money, if the state did rather than the federal, that would be something that maybe we could consider, that that forgivable loan is not going to be taxable, to the entity. But I'm not sure how the federal government's going to handle that. I would imagine they're probably going to want, the taxes on that on a forgivable loan. So those are the type of things, that I could see right away, as some tax incentives. But I'm sure we could take that back to Debbie Durham and have her maybe get some legislation put into place that maybe some tax credits of some type or whatever, that they do to help on a state level as well. So sorry, I'm not very, very thorough on that, but that's really not my area. But that's a great question, and I think Ann and I can bring that back to our Ways and Means chair and say, hey, is there anything we can do tax incentive-wise for our businesses that have been affected?
Okay, thank you. Ian, anything to add
I
there?
just want to comment, and this is, again, it's on the federal level with the PPP loans, but we've been hearing that it's possible, I think everyone's been hearing it's been possible that they're not able to bring everyone, the employers aren't able to bring everyone back in order to make that money, 75% of the money paid in 60 days. So I know in the federal House yesterday, they just passed almost unanimously that they're going to extend that out as far as payroll, paying it a little bit longer, and then also the percentage of 75 to payroll, 25 to rent and utilities will be adjusted 60-40. So that would be looking good for our businesses, that we're able to take advantage of that in this county. So I just wanted to add that because it came up last night.
Okay, thank you. So you both a little bit mentioned our unemployed individuals, and so we know that many people have been laid off as a result of COVID-19. And so, do you foresee any programs or resources becoming available for those unemployed individuals that are maybe wanting to upskill or learn a new trade to fulfill some of these open positions that we have?
Tim and I have talked a lot with Iowa Central and the community colleges. I know that they are looking to increase their programs on upskilling to meet some of the demands that we've noticed we've had. So I think rather right now our focus is on funding community colleges. And I think that that's one of the ways that we'll see more of those jobs be able to come online.
I think federally, or the unemployment part of it is that the unemployment insurance, I think, has been pretty kind to our workers that are on unemployment. So I think there might be a misnomer out there that if people were laid off and they're on unemployment, they were actually getting an additional $600 a week over what they normally made. So, I hope that the people that were on unemployment were smart enough to, take that money and lay it off to the side with their stimulus checks and stuff and build up that surplus, maybe to be able to use on some of these retraining if that's what they wanted to do. Another thing that I think is going to be a problem that was maybe an unintended consequence, and Ann and I have talked about this, is that when the governor put in the proclamation that they did not have to pay their rent for 2 months. I think a lot of people took that as we don't have to pay our rent, and I think what was meant by that, I know what was meant by that, is that you're going to have to make up those 2 months, but you don't have to pay them right now. And with the unemployment being so generous, I hope the majority of people that received that paid their rent, so they didn't spend that money and then now all of a sudden don't have the money. and the evictions start coming because they still owe 2 months of past rent that they didn't pay. And, so I don't know if there have to be further action there. I think that's an unintended consequence that probably wasn't thought through fully when that was put into place, and maybe not communicated properly, that they still are going to have to make up those 2 months. I think the thing that a lot of our renters have kind of in their back pocket as an ace is that it's going to be hard to find any renters. So if I had a renter and they owed me 2 months of rent, am I going to evict that person and not be able to find anybody else because all of them are in the same spot? Or are the owners of the rentals just going to have to eat those 2 months? And so it's going to be, I mean, it's not an easy conversation to have, and I think a lot of it was just miscommunicated or interpreted improperly, that it was a 2-month hiatus of having to pay rent, when a lot of people just don't understand it. They still have to make that up. So as far as the funds that unemployed Iowans have gotten, I feel that they were treated very, very fairly if they were able to apply for unemployment. If not, then I know that there are some, you know, waitresses and waiters at some of our restaurants that, you know, were working more part-time and unable to apply for unemployment benefits. Those are the ones that people like that were still working, but not fully, and they weren't receiving full checks and maybe not able to apply for unemployment benefits. And those are the ones that, I think that we have to do something for, if there's anybody that, we have to do something for.
Right. And what about those individuals that were that did lose their job as a result of coronavirus, but then they want to learn a new trade? So, Senator Kreinbrink, do you envision there being any like resources or programs available for them now as a result of COVID-19? Do you think there's going to be anything new coming down the pipe specifically to fulfill some of those openings within our skilled labor?
Yeah, I think they're probably, I think our community college, one thing I've always said about Iowa Central, it almost seems like, they have a crystal ball. And so they kind of are on the front edge of knowing what, and I think Kelly, I think helps, the Growth Alliance helps them a lot in that, saying, hey, this is what we have coming to our community. We need people trained in this. And it probably makes the community colleges look really smart, but they're probably getting their information from Kelly and those guys, saying, hey, this is what we have to do because we have them coming into town and nobody else knows it. But I think there's always going to be, we always have grants and scholarships and those types of things available at our community colleges, whether it's a last dollar scholar or, any of that stuff. They're all available. And, and they're being used every day. So whether you're unemployed because of Corona, or you have been working and still work part-time, trying to put food on the table for your family and go back and take schooling, at night or whatever, I don't see that changing a whole lot. And I don't see us not just stopping funding community colleges for training. I think that that's going to continue pretty much the way it has. And like I said, our Growth Alliance and our chambers and our community colleges seem like they have their thumb pretty closely on the things that the region needs for upcoming businesses coming to the community. Ann?
I agree. I think the community college is the source for those training programs. And again, we already have a lot of grants available for that. So I think that will just continue.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to talk a little bit about food supply. So the question here is food processing and food supply chains have been significantly impacted, and we are continuing to see that. And is this something that is going to be addressed at the State House?
That is not something that we've talked about in the break through our in the suspension through our caucus. So I will bring that back. But right now I don't have any information on that.
I think, I think that, we just heard today or last night that they're just closing down the pork processing Tyson plant in Storm Lake today, I think for a couple of weeks. And, I think everybody pretty much knows that, that every pig that's born and every calf that's born pretty much has its day of growth, and they know exactly how many days that is, and that hog or that calf is pretty much scheduled to go into processing at a certain time, and when that is interrupted, like it has been in the state of Iowa, then a lot of bad things happen, and bad things meaning, that the euthanization of animals, the shortage of certain meat cuts or certain meats in our grocery stores, those type of things. It only makes sense that that happens because that that part of the food chain is broken for that period of time, and there's no way, I mean, we've had people in our specific area that have had cattle sold for a couple of weeks, so they've had them sold, but they still have to keep them alive. So, you have to continue to feed them. So there's more expenses going into those animals, but yet they've already agreed on a price, and so the food chain is something that I don't know if there really is an answer. If 500 people in Storm Lake tested positive out of the 2,500 that work there, and they have to close it down, I really don't know what the answer would be. But like Ann said, you can hardly have like baseball, a backup pitcher in the wings ready to come in and take over. I mean, you just can't have another plant somewhere waiting to take these animals. It's too expensive to have a plant like that just sitting around without using it. So um, I the biggest thing is try to prevent it from getting into our processing plants, so our food chains aren't broken. This goes all the way, even with our turkey situation in our area. People would be surprised how many turkey farms that we have, within a 40-mile radius of Fort Dodge. It's unbelievable. I know Manson, Jill, you guys have them, right out of town there, but um, you know, even that, they just stop filling the barns. If they stop filling the barns because there's too much meat, or they can't process it quick enough, well then that means that there's going to be a shortage of some time because that meat isn't being grown, and so and then the bank's involved because a lot of them have notes at the bank, that they're trying to pay, and then that affects interest rates when people are borrowing money. So it's just amazing how the fingers of this economic machine that we belong to in the United States of America, when one entity hurts, everybody feels that pain, and so it's you think, okay, no big deal, it's just that. Well, it's not only that, it's everything is connected to that in some way.
Absolutely. Um, all right, I think that we'll move along to our next topic here, which we had several questions that were submitted relative to mental health. And Anne, I know this is something that you've been focused on quite a bit. And so I guess the majority of the questions are around additional funding for mental health. Now that we know that there is just this significant impact and almost, I think it's been thought of as kind of even a secondary impact to coronavirus and what this has done to people's state of mental health. And so can you talk a little bit about that and what's in the works as far as funding goes for mental health across the state of Iowa?
Yep, I would be happy to. So we've got definitely some money coming in through the CARES Act. DHS has put into place just in the past few days a new hotline, if you will, where people can call in and access telehealth, mental health counseling visits, just because they've been affected by this, by the virus. I mean, so many people, there so many things have happened that we expected when people are home and they can't get out. We expected, with jobs being lost, we expected a demand on the food banks and SNAP benefits, and we got that. What we didn't get an increase in applications for Medicaid. We're expecting some numbers to come up because we also during this time didn't kick anyone off Medicaid. So sometimes when the funding, let's say Medicaid still requires somewhat of a premium in some cases, that premium intake was suspended during this whole time. One thing we have a decrease of were child abuse cases. And that's not because we had less child abuse. It's because the kids were not seen by their teachers, their mandatory reporters. So we're worried that there's been a lot of abuse out there that's not being reported, and kids are suffering because of it. So this virus, while it's definitely a health problem, it's brought on a host of brain health issues as well. So we are looking to address those with certain programs, counseling. And while the senator spoke about a status quo budget, I'm on the Health and Human Service budget, and we have been talking about increasing certain silos for mental health funding. And I'm hoping that's still going to go forward because this is a problem that's only gotten worse in the past few months. So yes, I am talking to our budget chair about that, and I'm hopeful that we are going to have more mental health funding. And we are going to be taking some of that money from the CARES Act as well.
You know, one of the things too that I don't know if everybody was aware of this, but the governor was pushing pretty hard for the 1 cent sales tax. That was kind of just getting into the swing, and they were lobbying pretty hard on that when right before we went home. And if you remember, that was designed to take a lot of the pressure off of property tax and put that on the 1 cent sales tax, which would have created a lot of money, a lot of extra money for mental health. Also in that was, the nutrient reduction for the farmers, and also the Department of Natural Resources. Those were the areas where that 1 cent sales tax was going to be going. So they just started lobbying pretty hard on that, and it was one of the governor's major priorities. And the best part about it was the additional money that it was going to give us to fund, a more robust and actually accessible mental health program. That I just can't see, with the negotiating on something that's that large. If you can imagine 1 cent sales tax on everything that's sold in the state of Iowa, I just don't see that going through in a week and a half. So that's going to have to be hopefully a fight that we're going to fight probably next year in the chambers and with the governor. Not a fight, but we'll try to get to some type of an agreement, with that. So, um, like Ann said, I feel that the governor is holding back enough of the CARES Act money that we will be able to fund mental health appropriately. And hopefully Ann's wrong, which she probably isn't, but hopefully she's wrong when she's saying there's more abuse out there than what we know. We know what happens. We know we aren't seeing those kids. The mandatory reporters aren't. Um, I mean, all of us can just hope and pray that that's not the situation, but we don't know. So.
Okay, thank you. And I think that you both kind of in a roundabout way maybe answered this question, but we had a follow-up question that was submitted that is it realistic for us to expect the state to provide additional funding for mental health, or should we concentrate our efforts on federal funding?
I think we should do both. I mean, when we're looking at, like my area before we found out about this CARES Act money for HHS, for Health and Human Services, they asked me to cut $50 million out of my budget, and $50 million is a lot of money. And so I was going around trying to find a penny here, a penny there. But we were very, very cognitive of any money that comes from the federal government that is matched. So if the federal government says you can have 80 million, but you have to provide 35 million in order for you to get that 80 million, we made sure that those areas weren't cut, because if we cut it, it's actually a double cut because we're losing federal money as well. And so there's a lot of that happens. There's a lot of federal money that's given to us at the state with strings attached that we will match some of those funds. So we're very, very aware and cognitive of the ability to leverage federal funds so that we take full advantage of that's our money too. I mean, we all pay federal income tax, and so it's our chance to get some of that back to serve the people in Iowa that actually pay those taxes as well. So I would say that we are always looking to use federal funds to the max that we possibly can, even to the point where if it takes state funds to match, we will match it just to get the federal funds. So we do. We're very cognitive of that.
We absolutely, on our budget, that specific HHS budget, we are always looking to not limit our federal funds, because anytime we can pull those down, again, we've all paid into that. It should come back to as much as we can get back to our state, the more we want to get back to our state. So,
really, I was thinking about this the other day. There's billions and billions of dollars that came into our state from the federal government. I mean, every state did. I mean, and Iowa's got 3 million people, so we didn't get probably nearly as much as Illinois or, but if you think of the billions and billions of dollars in stimulus and PPP and all the things that came into the state of Iowa, if that were taxed at the federal and state level, we would probably have a lot of revenue, because that, instead of us making the money like we normally do with our economy was flooded with federal funds that came in. Now we'll still get sales tax on a lot of that because they're still going to buy stuff with that money, right? Maybe not food, but if they buy things, we're still going to get sales tax off of the federal funds that came into Iowa. But if we make the stimulus, that $1,200 check, tax free to the recipients, then we're not going to be, of course, leveraging any income tax off that, but yet it still lets that money stay in the hands of the people that received it as well. And hopefully they will spend it on something that we receive sales tax on. So with the billions and billions of dollars that came into the state of Iowa, we still as a state have to benefit from that somehow, because the taxes are still going to be paid on those monies, even though we weren't generating it here. I don't know if that makes sense to people, but at some point we'll see how much Iowa did receive and what type of an impact that stimulus had on the state of Iowa.
All right, thank you. So we're just going to have one more question here, and this last question is around the question is about the current code that requires places of business to disclose outbreaks, and if there's going to be any changes to that. So currently, I believe it's 10 or more cases, and they need to disclose that as soon as it is practical. Are there going to be any changes or updates to that?
Do you know, Ann?
No, I was just listening, like everyone else was probably, to the press conference yesterday. And that is kind of an arbitrary number that came about because if there's an outbreak of flu or another contagious disease in schools, 10% is the number that they consider to be an outbreak of any contagious disease. So I don't know if there's going to be any changes yet. We haven't talked about that in the House, and really yesterday was the first time I've heard it addressed in the press conference.
Okay.
I mean, I could see it happening. I could see, it's just something that has never come to the forefront before. And, now that this has happened, and, so if there was no limit, if a processing plant had 500 positive cases and they didn't tell anybody, of course, that would get out pretty quickly in a town the size of Fort Dodge or Storm Lake. But if they didn't tell anybody, I could see where there might be some liability if that wasn't something that was put into place. But I could see us, maybe not this session, but I could maybe see that being a point of concern in the future, as we reassess everything that's going on with this pandemic. I think there's going to be a lot of laws that are going to be made to address everything from liability to, I come into your place and I say, oh, I've got COVID now, and I know I got it at Growth Alliance. I know I got it there. Well, how do you know you got it there? And so then there's got to be a liability that says, okay, I'm going to sue you because I know I got it there. And so there has to be some protection, put into place as well, that someone just can't come in and accuse. I mean, there has to be proof and protection, and the right for a proper protocol. So I would imagine there's a lot of this stuff that's going to be coming down the pike where we're going to have to make decisions on that, and that's probably going to be one of them. Self-reporting.
Absolutely. We did have a question regarding what you were just talking about that I wasn't sure if I was going to have enough time to get to, and it was about liability for our small businesses that are opening up and they are inviting the public into their store or their place of work, and what does that look like if someone believes that they contracted COVID-19 while shopping in a certain store, and what is, from a liability standpoint, how do those businesses address that? So I'm glad to hear that that's on your mind as something that you're anticipating.
I think once we get going here, Jill, the next 6-8 months, we're going to see lawsuits out of the yin yang. I mean, it's just the way it happens. I mean, we're going to see lawsuits, so something's going to have to be put in place. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the insurance for that company or that small business is going to be so high that they couldn't afford to keep the doors open, and that's why some of them aren't opening now, is because they're afraid of that liability if they do get accused of having someone contract COVID in their store or in their restaurant or in their bar. Um, as long as proper protocol is followed, then, you know, if you got someone going around coughing on everybody that's an employee of yours and you know it, and you just let it happen, you know, there might be a problem there. But if all the protocols followed, and you know, then the liability should be limited because everything was followed, you know, of what the health organization told us to do. So, yeah, I'm sure that's going to be on our plate in the near future. So,
And that is legislation that we're talking about, that we just talked about yesterday, protecting businesses, whatever the business is, as long as you are putting into place best practices and guidance that you've received, you're following, you know, hand sanitizing and keeping your areas clean, that you should have limited, you shouldn't be liable as a business if someone
well,
does.
and those protocols change daily. I mean, one day you're supposed to wear a mask, the next day it didn't do any good. Well, then it's contracted on surfaces. Well, then it's not. You know, I mean, all these things change daily. On this virus is so new that we just don't know enough about it yet, and so, you know, what you think is happening today might not be what's happening tomorrow.
Yeah, agreed. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I want to allow enough time for both of you just to kind of share a couple of closing comments, or if you wanted to share anything additional about the questions that were asked today. So Senator Kreinbrink, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Well, just want to thank you, Jill, for organizing this and putting it together. And I understand there's probably 28 to 30 people on here, which is pretty close to what we usually have at Eggs and Issues. And I saw some names on there that weren't at Eggs and Issues, and I saw some that are. And this is kind of what the Eggs and Issues are like. And the only thing is you get to ask questions there, which is kind of cool. But you know, and I know I speak for Ann, we look forward to the times that we're able to communicate with our constituents. When you contact us either by cell phone or through email, hopefully, if it's not a form letter, you know, that is just being passed around, and you contact us, we get your answer to you as quick as possible, and because you deserve that. You deserve people that will stand up and fight for you, and as well take your concerns to the State House. So thanks again. It's been an opportunity. It's a strange opportunity, of course, but it's been a pleasure and an honor to serve District 5, and look forward to continuing to do that for this district. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Thanks, everyone, for coming and submitting your questions. Again, there's still some policy that we have, that I particularly have got off the House floor, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting it through this week. I've had a focus, and the House has had a focus on childcare this session, and I have a few policy bills that I think will get through. I also have another bill that addresses children's mental health in schools, allowing them to have therapeutic sessions there with complete privacy. So that's one bill that won't cost the state a penny, and it will increase our rural access for kids' mental health. I appreciate all the contact that you give both of us. When one of us gets a question, we always forward it to the other, and so we know that both of us are aware of what's going on out there, and we are both working hard to get your questions and your problems solved. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at the next Eggs and Issues.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you both for joining us, and thank you for everyone that tuned in to watch today. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Senator Kreinbrink or Representative Meyer, and they can get those answered for you. But again, thank you for joining us today, and that wraps up our webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.